Thank you, Chair, and also thank you to PILA and FLAC for the kind invitation for the ICTU to be part of your evening. I'm going to start by saying something positive because people tell me I do nothing but give out. So to say, first of all, there are two really good examples of companies being involved in human rights, and both of those are Pennies and then the Ethical Hotels Initiative. But because the colleague from the business and the community, I don't want to steal all his clothes by talking to you about all the positive examples, I'm going to leave the examples to him, but they are two excellent examples, in particular the Pennies initiative. I think Ireland and Irish companies have quite a good track record abroad when it comes to human rights. You can regularly pick up annual reports, and you'll find very good examples of how companies are ensuring that their supply chain is ethical. Obvious examples being the purchase of coffee. You regularly see in your supermarket, or indeed even Ryanair, I think, says our coffee is ethically sourced. So we have quite a good record when it comes to business abroad. But of course, the deciding factor of whether a company or indeed a society is ethical is the extent to which it recognises human rights everywhere. And that includes here in Ireland. And I think that's where a lot of companies are really falling down. Certainly, our own research tells us that 60% of the people who aren't in unions will join a trade union, except for that they're afraid of what will happen to them. So there's an awful lot of people who aren't in unions. The main reason that they're given for not being in a trade union is because of concern that their employer will in some way victimise them. And of course, being in a trade union is one of the fundamental human rights. It was, in the construction of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, all of them have within them a provision that says that the right to be in a trade union, the right to collectively bargain, is a fundamental human right. So I think it's very difficult for companies to claim credibly that they respect human rights if that very fundamental right, the right to be in a trade union, isn't being properly respected. The law firms, we have people phoning us from law firms who aren't allowed to be in trade unions, NGOs too. So lots of organisations, even involved in promoting human rights, sometimes aren't willing to respect that most fundamental of rights, the right to be in a trade union and to bargain collectively. There was some good news on the horizon in that the European Court of Human Rights has very recently ruled that the right to collective bargaining is an inherent right within the right to freedom of association. So the trade unions in Ireland are currently proceeding with a complaint against Ireland to the European Court of Human Rights, in particular on foot of the problematic ruling from the Supreme Court, which said, well, because of freedom of association, and a person doesn't have to be in a union, and if a person doesn't have to be in a union, well, then a company doesn't have to deal with a trade union either. Now that's very problematic, and it's problematic for trade union rights, but if you think about it, it's a catastrophe for human rights. And the reason I would say it's a catastrophe for human rights is that human rights should not be subject to business concerns. Because then where do we stop? It would be cheaper to run your business with slaves. Yeah? Now, I'm being provocative in saying that. But it is the theoretical framework in which we have started to walk in Ireland by making a decision that a company can say that it has a right not to recognise trade unions. And that is on business concerns. Of course, we teach this as a business model in our schools. Anybody who goes to learn how to have a human resources or strategic management or any of the business courses in Ireland, what we will be taught to be taught the Ryanair model. And it's upheld as not only a legitimate model, but as a desirable model. One which is the Ryanair model is established and built on not respecting. They spent millions to go to the Supreme Court to ensure that there wouldn't be respect for trade union rights. So that is problematic in Ireland in that we have a business culture and a culture which doesn't respect trade union rights. And as I said, if we allow that to happen for one trade union right, where do we end up with the other ones? We also then have a situation where European law is being used, European business law is being used to restrict trade union rights. So, for example, in Ireland, the Competition Authority has decided that people, freelance journalists, voiceover actors, musicians, are all undertakings. And because they're undertakings, it's an illegal cartel, a hardcore cartel, if those people get together and bargain in a union. Now, every time I say this to people who are involved in competition law in Europe, they laugh at me and say that's nuts. But it may well be nuts, but it's the law in Ireland. And so if we were all to get together and to, so for example, in the NUJ in the UK, they have, freelancers are free to be in a union. The NUJ represents them, free to represent them, to pursue their interests. Not the same here in Ireland.